Hi, I'm Jennifer Vanderveen, an ACTEC Fellow from Mishawaka, Indiana, and today we're discussing what to know before moving to a retirement community, financial, legal, and lifestyle considerations. I'm thrilled to be joined by Crystal West Edwards, ACTEC Fellow from Morristown, New Jersey, and together we're going to explore some of the key questions that you should be considering before you make this important life transition. So, Crystal, let's start at the very beginning. What are retirement communities? And what are we looking at when we start going and visiting these places?
Thanks, Jen. So, what is a retirement community? I want to start really by saying it is whatever you want it to be. And I
Exactly.
say that partially jokingly, partially serious, because a retirement community really does depend on that specific community as to what it provides. So, it is really important to find out what the level of care is for the particular place that you're looking at. It could be anything from independent living, where you're able to maneuver your general activities of daily living. You're able to come and go as you may please, and you don't require any ongoing or hands on assistance for things. Or it could be the complete opposite of that, where the community is providing skilled nursing services for people who need a custodial level of care. The in between of that, though, is what we often call assisted living. Assisted living is where you're able to do certain things, may need assistance with certain things. And so you buy services based on the support that you need. Maybe you're someone who just needs help with medication management, but you can do any and everything else independently. So that would be something where you may have a lower level of care need, but a higher cost than someone who's truly in independent living. So, stage one is going to be making sure that you know what your level of care is.
And what about memory care? I'm looking for a memory care facility. I hear a lot, and people don't seem to know where that fits into this.
Because I feel like they made it up during COVID. But
They
again,
did.
so memory care can be provided at any stage, right? At any level of care. I think what they're really talking about are places that will consider themselves specialists, if you will, in providing services for people who may have cognitive impairment, who may be able to do their own support living. For example, maybe you can bathe, maybe you can feed yourself, maybe you can walk independently, but you have to be reminded to get dressed. You have to be reminded to brush your teeth. And so, for a lot of places, memory care is really just a care distinction, but we still have to determine what our base level of care is, whether it be assisted living or skilled nursing.
And then once you determine assisted living, we also have to look at level of care in terms of pricing.
Oh, the most fun part of the discussion, right? How much is this going to cost us? For how long? How many
Well,
children
and
do you want for me to pay for this bed that I'm about to sleep in?
and there's no standard set rule of how assisted livings charge. So, typically when you look at a skilled nursing facility, the general standard is you pay X dollars per day for this bed,
Period.
period. Where assisted livings can be anything from here's the one price and everything is included to a literal menu of, you know, do we need medication reminders? Do we need laundry? Do we need help dressing? That you have to pick each individual piece.
Yeah, and so because of that, it can make comparing different communities prior to admission a little bit more challenging. So I like to tell families to go in with the same set of information at all the different places. For example, I'll say, you walk in and you say, my mom needs assistance dressing and she needs assistance getting in and out of the shower, and that's it. Assuming that those are the only two things that she needs help with, what is my level of care? Meaning, what rating are you going to give me or give my mom for purposes of charging us on a monthly basis? And what are the things that could change what that cost level is in the future?
And how often could that cost level change in the future?
And how much
Looking at,
are we going to get before you do it?
right, if the level of care changes, are you going to give me, 30 days notice that mom's care level's going up? Or if I want a level of care change, can a family come in and say, we want to increase level of care? And what sort of notice provisions are there? Which brings us to the fun that is the contract.
Yes, the part that the lawyers love and the people hate.
So when you're admitting someone to one of these facilities, whether it's you moving in or a family member who's helping someone move in, and they hand you this big stack of documents. What are some of the key things people should be looking for in that big stack of documents?
So the very first thing that I would look at is whose name is on it. And what I mean by that is usually when you get a contract to review, it's not blank. It will typically be partially completed by the salespeople that you spoke to when you went and you did your tour. Why did I call these fine people salespeople? I call them salespeople because that's exactly what they are. They're salespeople. They're going to tell you whatever they feel they need to tell you to buy into this community, right? But the first question is whose name is on the contract? Because that, in large part, is going to tell us who's potentially bound by the contract. If I am going to look at assisted living facilities, for example, that my friend Jen is going to be residing in, and I get that contract and the contract is titled to Crystal, red flag number one. Why are you asking me to sign this contract when it's Jen that's going to be getting the care, not Crystal? And so, if, however, I, as Crystal, am serving in a fiduciary capacity, meaning Jen has trusted me enough to appoint me to make decisions on her behalf and to act in her shoes and in her stead by way of signing a general durable power of attorney, or by the court having appointed me as her guardian, then still the contract would be titled to Jen, but I would just be signing it on her behalf. So flag number one is whose name is on the contract, because that will tell us who initially may be bound by its terms.
It also tells you how you should be signing that contract. So if you're signing a contract on my behalf, you want your signature to indicate that you are acting for me.
That's right.
If it's something as simple as just signing Crystal West Edwards POA, that works. Technically, if you want to get really specific about it, you probably should be signing Jennifer Vanderveen by Crystal West Edwards attorney in fact.
That's right. That's the lawyer's favorite.
That doesn't fit on anything.
At all.
So, it's just making sure that you've done something in that signature to indicate that you're signing on someone else's behalf.
But Jen, what do we do in the era of tech everything where all contracts, even when you're going to buy or sell a house, are coming via DocuSign? Do you ever advise families about that issue? Like, how do they sign a contract that's coming over electronically?
So I tell them to do that in two different ways. The first is most of those electronic signature options will have a place where you can draw it with your finger and no one can ever read it. But, rather than clicking one of the easy pre signed options, you know, use that box so that you can indicate that you're doing this as an attorney in fact under a POA. The other thing to do is if you know that you're going to be signing a lot of these, um, go to some of the more common platforms like DocuSign, like Adobe Sign, and think about setting up a free account where you can go in and upload a signature to use on some of these documents. And so instead of just it being a generic, if you have a DocuSign account or an Adobe Sign account, it can pull in a custom signature that you've already uploaded. And that's a good way to get some of this information into that document.
Perfect. So, in reviewing that agreement, there are a couple of things that I always look for, red flags that I tell families to be aware of. The first thing that I want people to be aware of after knowing who's going to be bound by the contract is whether or not that agreement is having the family agree, contractually agree, to do things that the law does not require them to. So, for example, if I have a contract for a community that says that if for some reason, again, I'm signing Jen in to this particular assisted living facility, if that agreement says that if Jen is unable to pay her care expenses, that she could be terminated from the contract and that Crystal, as her responsible party, then must come and pick her up, huge red flag, abort. I don't really let my families agree to that. And the reason is because facilities have to provide a safe, suitable discharge regardless of why you're leaving. So I don't love families contractually being bound to do something that the law doesn't require them to. But the other thing to be aware of, just from a standpoint of to be forewarned is to be forearmed, is what happens in the event that the contract has to be terminated. And sometimes termination doesn't just come from the sense of you're not happy at the facility or at the community. It could be that clinically you're not able to stay. There was a medical emergency that requires you or your loved one to be moved to a hospital or to another care setting, or the unfortunate that someone has passed away. So knowing what the contract terms say are really going to guide you on what your next steps are. And spoiler alert, 100% of contracts that I've reviewed all say that you have to continue paying them until all your stuff is out of the room. Even if someone has passed away, it's not over at the date in which they've passed. There's still an obligation to remove belongings before the clock, so to speak, or let's say the ticker of continuing to having to pay for care fully ends. So just know what those terms are going in so that you know how to take next steps in the event that something were to happen and you could no longer reside there.
And knowing, what your options would be if you did need to leave the facility or change level of care and, what those timings look like. If you wanted to move mom closer to another child, for example, and you have to give 45 days notice. Well, then going in that you've got to let the facility know 45 days before mom's going to move. You don't want to let them know the day you're moving her out. Hey, by the way, we're leaving because you're going to be on the hook for another month or so of payments.
That's right.
So hopefully we've given you some guidance and some things to look for when looking for your next step in life. And for more information, visit actec.org/estate-planning.